Hello, thank you for joining the Brazos River Saints podcast. Today I have the Johnsons here with me, both Kevin and Colleen Johnson. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. So the whole point of the podcast is to get to know each other. So, Brother Johnson, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I was born and raised in Northern California in Sacramento. In my youth, I met Colleen through a friend when we were young teenagers. I went to BYU, and at BYU, I reconnected with my passion, which was marine biology.
Okay.
So I got my degree in zoology at BYU. While during that time, also I served a mission. I went to the Colorado Denver mission, which at the time was one large mission for Denver, and it kind of caught edges of all the neighboring states. So it was like part of Wyoming, Kansas, Nebraska, New Mexico, and Oklahoma, and all of Colorado. So I served all over those areas, and I enjoyed it very much. I had some great experiences there.
Right.
And then I went into biology, and now I'm a scientist. I've been an oceanographer, marine biologist, and environmental scientist. So that's me.
Wow.
Nutshell.
There you go. Sister Johnson, how about yourself?
So I'm also born and raised in Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, where do you want me to start? My parents investigated churches for 11 years. I was about 10 when so my parents investigated the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for 11 years specifically. Before that, they were always searching.
Gotcha. Right.
And so it was through mutual friends when I was on a soccer team that my parents associated with other members, some fathers and so forth. And my dad got to be good friends with them. And so they invited us out to church. And so lots of different things brought us to the church. So by the time I was 14, I was baptized when I was about 13, 12, almost 13. And then when I was about 14 is when I first met Kevin, that I remember, was a church dance. And he was 6'4", at 14 and intimidating. So we just met. He left an impression, just to say that. And then went off to college. I went to BYU Provo, and we reacquainted to the point where we started dating my senior year. And then by the time I graduated from BYU, we were engaged. But then we got married the year after that. So
wow.
Yeah, in a nutshell. And I got my degree in English with emphasis in teaching. And so I do have my teaching credential.
Awesome.
So I'm not here in Texas, but I've taught in the past.
Right. So you have used your teaching degree in the past?
Yes. I did English as a second language first when my oldest was about 13. She might have been 13 when I finally went back to work for the first time, and then did that for about a year. And then I've done English, taught young children. So I've worked through a college in Florida that had a special program for parents, caregivers, and their children. And so I did a lot with the early childhood education. I did that for about 10 years. And then I did administrative work, ran a school for the last couple of years before I moved.
Nice. Awesome.
So a big change.
That is a big change.
And we were in Florida for 22 years. Where I was working at a university there. And I'll also mention that I was raised in the church on my dad's side. I'm seven generations in the church with pioneer ancestry. So lots of genealogy and
really cool stuff
and fun stuff there. But then about a year ago, we made the move from Florida to come here to Texas for the first time, which it was a great job opportunity. But also, I have a brother that lives in the Dallas area.
Gotcha.
So close to being in the family.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. So were you? Obviously, you came here for the job. I mean, but was it something that you were looking for, or was it just something that just popped up and you're like, oh, hey?
Good question.
I was looking. I wasn't happy where I was.
Understood.
So I was looking pretty actively, and actually, all of a sudden, post-COVID had a whole flood of opportunities but this was the very best one for our family, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
It was prayerful.
A lot of prayerful decisions. Yeah.
Right. So I asked this because we had a very similar experience when we moved to Granbury. There were a lot of very, very noticeable tender mercies of the Lord that brought us here. Right. So did you see those in your life as part of your move here?
Oh yeah, definitely. Do you want to share yours first?
Sure. I think things really fell into place. Family, the job opportunity. Even I had to come a little ahead of Colleen and
6 months before I
and our youngest child who was still at home. But I landed into this little apartment in Glenrose that was, affordable, really affordable, which would have been tough if I'd had to pay like a premium for a place to live while we were maintaining our home still. And also the sale of our home, the timing of that in Florida.
Right.
That was amazing.
It was right when because of the soaring interest rates, homes weren't moving real fast anywhere in the country.
Right.
And so the timing of getting our home sold in Florida and getting the home we wanted here, it worked out well in the end. But it seemed like a blessing when, in retrospect, when we see what wasn't working.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, so when things line up and just fall into place,
yeah,
like you feel like you see the Lord's hand, you can't deny it. I think it was such a big move for our family because we had been there for so long and we were so established and so many connections that
we raised all 4 of our children there, and we'd only ever been in one home.
Right.
Yeah,
owned one home.
Yeah. Well, we moved 18 times in the first 10 years of our marriage.
Oh wow.
And so then the next 21 years, we never moved. So it was other than we lived in New Zealand for a year. But other than that, it was a really kind of a gut-wrenching kind of thing. But at the same time, I knew that's what we were supposed to do. I felt really good about it. I actually, for probably a year to 2 years before we sold our house, I had this really overwhelming feeling of get things in order. Get your house in order, not necessarily our house, but like get your everything in order. And so I remember I just remember feeling like there were all these little things I was trying to take care of. That we had an older home, 1960s home near the beach, and you can not ever have enough maintenance when you live near the beach, the corrosion. And so it was constantly just keeping track of that. So anyway, I felt strong to do that. And then when things worked out and he got the job, it just felt right. Felt really right. But there were so many ducks I had to get in a row.
Right.
So one of them was our daughter had to graduate. Well, she wanted to go to a Florida school and she would have to graduate from a Florida school to have residency.
Right.
But she had her whole senior year left. And then when we sat down with the counselor, realized she could graduate in one semester if she dual enrolled in the local college. So all of a sudden she had 2 classes that were needed to be a full year's length, but because she took them at the college, she only had to do 1 semester.
Oh, wow.
So that was a huge blessing because she did graduate a semester early and still have residency. And we were able to join Kevin, and But I think the biggest thing for me was moving the house, selling the house. Like Kevin was saying, like they were selling. And then literally we were probably 3 weeks too late, put our house on the market. And it was just like stopped because the interest rates went up.
Right.
And I remember feeling really strong. I love the story of the brother of Jared and bringing the rocks to God. And I was like, okay, I'm going to bring the rocks. I'm going to bring the stones and I'm going to say, this is my plan. This is how I see it working out. And I remember literally sitting down with my Heavenly Father, making a plan for our life. Okay, now if you can get our house sold by this date, and then we can buy a house by this date, then we can move in time to, I literally had a timeline. And I remember feeling God, feeling this total peace, like it's going to work out.
Right.
It's going to work out. And I was like, okay, this is going to work out. We don't know, but it's going to work. And it's so funny because as the month progressed and we didn't sell our house by my new time frame, I started panicking, having these anxiety and like, oh my gosh, we're not going to be ready. And I remember praying about it, and God's like, you gave me 3 more weeks. Just give me the 3 weeks. Right. You gave me a plan. I'm doing it. And literally, it went off like clockwork. I don't know how. I mean, there were a lot of hiccups. We had another offer on a house and it falling through, like all this stuff. But literally, it couldn't have been more streamlined, to the point where the last day of school, my daughter, her last day of her senior year, which was the 22nd of December, we picked her up from school, literally started driving to Texas. She never even went home.
Wow.
And had the cat in the car, had everything, just picked her up and started driving. It's to the point where Christmas Eve, we arrived in Texas, and it was everything, like the help that Kevin got with the movers, with
the Brazos River Ward helping us move in, the Elders Quorum and everything was great.
I just felt like, and there were many times where I was like, I would get anxiety over the months, like, oh, this isn't going.
Right.
I remember we praying God be like, this is exactly what you asked for.
It's fine.
Just trust me, it's going to work. And so I definitely had tender mercies.
And of course, because we were so tired of having an old house that was near the beach with salt and high maintenance,
right,
we came here and bought a house that was built in 1890.
Right, because you like the old house.
Yeah, because we love maintenance.
Right. That's the way it works, though, right?
Yeah.
You always buy the house and you're like, wait, why did I do this? Why did I buy this house?
Yes.
Yes. So can we just step back for a minute?
Of course.
That you were talking about your parents investigating the church. So you weren't a member when you were a kid. How old were you when they joined? Or when, I guess, your family joined?
So it would have been in 1981. My parents were in the church. I was 11, almost 12.
Okay.
And I remember the missionaries, my brother and I were both old enough to get baptized. So I would have been 11, almost 12, and he would have been 10. And then my two younger siblings who were under 8. And so the missionaries said, there were 2 sister missionaries.
Right.
My parents went through probably 6 to 8 sets of missionaries over those 11 years. And they would, lose their information, and then a year or 2 later, they'd come back. And so my parents were investigating even before I was doing soccer. So my mom and dad both sort of just dabbling. So when my parents joined, the missionaries came to me and said, would you and your brother want to get baptized? And I was like, I thought I had to. And they're like, no, it's your choice. Right. I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. Because I was like, wait a minute. I didn't sit on all the discussions. I had gone to church every Sunday for a whole year.
Right.
But I was like, I think I just was exercising my free agency. Like, I'm going to do my own investigating.
Sure.
So that next year.
And weren't you enjoying a little bit keeping that option of being perfect in the future?
Yes, totally.
not wasting your perfect pass.
Right.
I think there's definitely not wanting to repent.
You're like, once I get baptized, I'm good. So I got to go out and get it all done now. Right.
Yeah, as a 12-year-old. Right. So I think the
irony there is that she was a really, really good girl. So.
Well, thanks for thinking that. But I do think that looking back, that was really important for me to investigate on my own. And so I had wonderful young women leaders. Mm-hmm. They were really, that's where I learned the most. It was from my leaders and teachers and the other young women. And so after about a year, I don't remember what happened. If the missionaries came to me, I know. So they're planning a temple trip. Everybody was going to go on the temple trip. And I was so excited to go to the temple for the first time. And
because you were going to church every week.
Yeah, I was more active than most active members.
Right.
Like I would every single week. And
they're like, hey, you got to be baptized.
Exactly. They're like, oh, you can't go. And I was like, what? And they're like, well, you're not a member. And I was like, oh, I got to get baptized then. Like, like I believe everything not just made sense, but I felt like it was right.
Right.
My mom and dad had really set a strong foundation for me to accept it. Like, I had enough Bible background. I had Bible stories, and we would talk about. I prayed all this. And they taught me how to pray, and so I'd been praying about it, and I was like, yeah, of course. Like there was nothing in the gospel that didn't feel right.
Right. Awesome.
And I wasn't around then, but I've heard this story. And so my favorite part of the story actually is the fact that when they started planning this temple trip, the leaders, her young women leaders were like, nah, you can't go. But her friends at church were like, she's not a member?
Yeah.
They had no idea.
That's true.
That's funny. No, I was curious because it's, when a family joins the church are the kids joining because, hey, mom and dad are joining, so we're going to do it? Or was it that the kids were like, hey, no, I got to figure this out for myself too? So that's interesting.
I really liked the way the missionaries didn't make me feel like I had to.
Mm.
And I have to be honest, watching my parents get wearing those white suits, I was like, I do not want to wear that.
I will not be caught dead in that thing. No way.
Kind of that, the polyester ones. I was like, they look so uncomfortable. And I was like, no way. I mean, I cared about what I wore.
Right.
So I had to come around to that.
And did your brother Ryan get baptized at the same time?
Same day. Yeah. We did.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome.
That's great.
I was perfect for about 30 minutes. That was it. Then I got mad at somebody.
All right, Brother Johnson, your wife's been talking for a while.
Yes.
So I think you should talk for a little bit here. So what was it that prompted you to go on your mission?
Mm-hmm.
And then tell us something really awesome that happened on your mission. Either a funny story or an inspiring story or just something great.
So in primary, I don't know how old I was. Maybe just 5 or 6. It was a very early memory for me. Singing the song, I Hope They Call Me on a Mission.
Right.
So a mission was really scary to me because my dad hadn't gone on one. So I didn't grow up hearing really inspiring stories about, hey, missions are great.
Right.
All I knew was that you went away from home and you were alone and you couldn't contact your family and all this. So in primary singing, I Hope They Call Me on a Mission. And at that time, I felt like I knew that I would go on a mission, and it scared me. But I still felt like I knew that I would. And so I always kind of felt deep in my soul that I would serve a mission. And that wasn't something that my parents pressured me to do. Like I said, my dad didn't go on a mission. He had health issues that prevented it.
Right.
But so then as I got to be a teenager and things, I had a good group of LDS friends, young men that I hung out with. And so we did some mischief and we got into trouble and this and that, but it was pretty innocent stuff. And and for the most part, it was all of those guys went on to serve missions and are good guys. And I think that we supported each other in that. And I also felt like I'd never had like a really earth-shattering answer to a prayer or conviction that built my testimony.
Right.
So I had to kind of question, okay, am I believing this and thinking I'll go on a mission because I was raised in the church or what? And it was really, at that time, I'm talking, I was like maybe 16, 17. I could say, okay, do I believe in Christ? Yes, I do. I believe Christ is our Savior. I believe he's risen and alive. And do I believe that in the Book of Mormon? And I was like, yeah, I do. I really felt strongly that the things I read in the Book of Mormon are true. I was still trying to gain a testimony of Joseph Smith, and I remember one time kind of going, well, if he is the one who translated or wrote the Book of Mormon, then if I feel the Book of Mormon is inspired and true, then of course Joseph Smith must be a prophet.
Right.
And then so that got me out of my mission. But then I think many experiences on my mission helped me to build a stronger testimony. But it was really very much just a one step at a time kind of thing. I never had a big ton of bricks fall on my head. Right. It was a building of just trust in the Lord, peace in the heart, subtle inspirations, and that cycle again and again and again.
Right.
That built my testimony. On my mission, I had a lot of great experiences. Like I said, I served in the Colorado Denver mission.
Right.
Probably one of the most memorable was we were tracting, which was a thing in my mission. I don't think they do as much of that nowadays.
We did it a lot.
But yeah, get out there and knock on doors, and which was super unproductive, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Almost never resulted in anything.
But it builds character.
It does. It sure does. It humbles you, and then when an opportunity came along, you were spiritually ready for it, right? But anyway, we were tracting in this area in Longmont, Colorado, and we had a map from the previous missionaries with the streets marked off that had been already knocked on, in the last few months. And so we were praying over, where should we go to knock on doors? And both my companion and I felt like we should go to this one street that was already marked off. So we said, well, let's follow that prompting. So we went into, which seemed a little strange because we got this whole map of many streets that have never been knocked on in recent memory. So we went to this street, and we'd been encouraged by one of the general authorities. He said, you are, as missionaries called and set apart, you are representatives of Jesus Christ. So you don't need to be shy. You can introduce yourself as representatives of Jesus Christ. Right. So we were working this street, getting doors slammed in our faces, and we saw this guy out mowing his lawn. And that's another thing. If you've tracked it, you know that you interrupt people doing something and they're not interested.
Yeah, right.
But we looked at each other. Should we talk to him? And we both, without a conversation, we both stepped off the curb and started walking over to his house because we both felt we should talk to him. He's about to mow his lawn, and we walked up. It was my turn to do the approach, and I said, "Hi there. We're representatives of the Lord Jesus Christ, and we'd like to invite you to be baptized into His true church." and
just went right in there, right?
And he looks at my companion. He goes, "This guy doesn't mess around." and he ended up sitting under a tree with us for a couple hours while we told him about the Book of Mormon, and we gave him a copy of the Book of Mormon and encouraged him to read. And did you have this experience on your mission where you encourage someone to read the Book of Mormon, and when you get back with them again, they almost never have read what you asked them to read?
Yeah. So
we came back for another appointment, and we launched right into our lesson, and we were talking about the story of Lehi and Nephi and the wilderness and Lehi's dream.
Right.
And he holds up his Book of Mormon that we gave him, and he goes, you mean like holding to the iron rod?
Wow. Yeah.
And we were like, did you do the reading that we asked you to? And he's like, yeah, I read it. He goes, actually, I read the whole, I started reading, I read the whole book. And,
wow.
And his name is Jay. And he was an amazing investigator, and he was so ready for the gospel, and he changed his life. Mm-hmm. And he had, in order to get baptized, he had to admit some really embarrassing
stories.
Do we have time for all that?
Just a 30 seconds.
He had to get things straight in his life, right?
Okay, here's what happened. He was about 30 years old.
Okay.
He had a reputation in his family of being kind of the black sheep and also on going off on wild goose chases and doing crazy things.
Okay.
So at 30, he was trying to turn his life around, and he told his parents he wanted to go to school, and they loaned him about $15,000 to go to college in Denver.
Okay.
But he had the bright idea, since he liked to smoke pot. Sure. He had the bright idea that he could use that $15,000 to launch a marijuana growing operation.
Oh,
in his basement.
That he could then turn around and
make money on it.
Extra money.
Right.
And so he's
like, this is the parable of the talents, but with marijuana.
So at one point when we were teaching him the lessons, and he said, I do believe the things you're telling me, is I've got to tell you guys something. And it was during that lesson, he took us down into his basement and showed us his watering and light operation down
right.
there.
Okay.
And he said, I got this all set up with the money my parents gave me to go to college. My parents believe I'm in college, and I was going to pay them back with the money I made from this. But if I believe what you're saying and I get baptized, I can't go ahead with this.
Right.
I can't complete the business plan.
Right.
So I'd have to tell my parents what I did. And he's like, so this is hard for me. But as we came back with lesson after lesson, he every time we came back, he was closer and closer to baptism and improving his life, and giving away his inappropriate magazine collection and
just burn it.
No, I don't know what he did, but so anyway, he did get baptized, and he did tell his parents, "Hey, I need to tell you that the money you gave me for school, I haven't been going to school. I spent it on getting a marijuana crop, and but I'm not going to do that. I've come to my senses, and I'm going to be baptized into into the Mormon church. which of course they're like, oh great, why don't you go back to selling marijuana?
Right, right.
And so they were skeptical about that. Like I said, he was a black sheep and always doing things kind of outside of the norm.
Sure.
And
He's creative.
And so it took them some years to understand that he was serious about this one and that it really had changed his life. And they did come to understand that. But I think they really appreciated what the church did for him in the long run. But it was hard adjustment for everybody at first. He met and married
married in the temple.
a lady in the temple in Denver, and he came out for our wedding. He was my best man at our wedding.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then he died in 2015, and he was one of the neatest experiences and greatest people that I got to know on my mission.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Great
awesome.
conversion story.
Lesson learned is track to that road again.
Yeah. Go ahead and knock on those doors. It's really hard and humbling.
It is very difficult to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a side story. I served in Nebraska, and my first air in Sydney, Nebraska. Scottsbluff. So I was in North Platte, and I tracked to D Street like 3 or 4 times. D Street in North Platte, Nebraska. And I remember like the 3rd time through, I had a new companion and he's like, let's do this street. And I'm like, no, let's not do this street. And he's like, no. And I'm like, no. And he's like, no, we have to. And I'm like, fine. So we're going through the street and we're knocking on doors and people are looking at me like, what do you want? What do you want, elder fella? You're back. And I'm like, yeah, I just come and see how you're doing.
Didn't you knock on my door 2 months ago and I told you to get lost?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was exactly the conversations. But it was the door approaches were different because I knew them. So I was like, hey, how are you doing? How are you again? But anyway, go do that. That's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And let's see what else about us. We have 4 children. We raised them all in Florida for the most part. Our
3 girls and a boy.
3 girls and a boy.
Okay.
Our oldest girl, Bethany, got her degree in sequential art,
also known as
AKA comics.
Oh, okay.
She went to Minneapolis College of Art and Design
And
in Minneapolis.
And she still lives in Minneapolis, and her sister Sarah has gone and joined her there, so they're roommates in Minneapolis. Gotcha. Our son Aaron went to BYU and served a mission in Spain, a COVID mission.
Oh, yeah. Right.
In fact, he was the day after he got on the plane for Madrid. President Trump at the time, 2020, COVID, closed down international travel due to COVID.
Oh wow! So he got there.
So if he hadn't gotten on that day, he would have been reassigned somewhere in the States or something. But he got to go to Spain and he stayed there. But it was a tough situation because I think, as most missionaries that served during the first year or 2 of COVID will tell you, it was like quarantine and it's all social networking and
he used his musical talents.
So he came back from that and finished up at BYU, and he's working as a librarian in Payson, Utah now. And then our youngest daughter, she came to Texas with us last year. She just graduated, but now she started school in Florida at Florida State.
Oh, awesome!
That's Lily.
That's where they are. So we're all by ourselves. We miss them.
Yeah.
We bought a house that everybody can come, but nobody's here.
But nobody shows up.
Nobody's showing up yet.
Well, they did come home for Christmas.
So yeah, that's true. That's nice.
There you go. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, will you tell us about a time in your life where you felt the power of Jesus Christ in your life?
One time?
Well, I mean, you can share as many as you'd like.
Yeah, we're on a clock. I know. The power of Jesus Christ. Wow.
Mine will be quick. I just aside from my mission and the experiences like that I shared, in choosing who to date and who to marry, I never had any doubts that this was the one, and so I felt guided by the Lord in that decision. And also in my career and those decisions I made, I felt things were very clear early on in our marriage and our schooling and things, and I attribute that to guidance by the Spirit. And through the years, there have been many starts and stops with my degree and my training and my employment. And at sometimes I felt pretty stressed about, what's going to happen next month, financially and stability wise. But we always paid our tithing, and we were always blessed with sufficient for our needs.
Yeah.
And so I have a testimony of that, and I believe that's a blessing.
Yeah. The windows of heaven are huge.
Yeah.
They are big.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a strong testimony of that. Give me your question exactly one more time. You said, the influence of Jesus Christ, the power of Jesus Christ?
Just either word would work. What a time in your life when you felt the influence or the power of Jesus Christ in your life?
I think it's going to be hard times, right? Where whether it was being alone or doing something that was really challenging, hard. I think, it's like an onion, right? There's layers of experiences. So like Kevin pointed out, like major decisions and stressful times, financially difficult times, or moving with young children and so forth. But I think that those for me were just a consistent companionship of the Holy Ghost. Right. I think the power of Jesus Christ are when I made changes, like challenging changes, or really had testimony building experiences. So I think I didn't serve a mission, like quote unquote, called by the church, but I felt like I had many opportunities in my life to be a missionary. And I think something I did when I was in high school, I was an exchange student in Germany my junior year, and I remember just I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like it was something that I wanted to do so bad, and I didn't know why. And I remember talking to my parents about it, and it required a real exchange where we took a child and I would live in their house. But my dad was a school teacher. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So we didn't have a lot of resources, and certainly was a 900 square foot home. We didn't have room for an extra person.
Right.
So it was a big sacrifice for my parents to even consider doing this. But in the end, they did. And they managed to fly me there. And I lived in a home. I just did it for 3 months. But at the time, I was kind of a new member, because I was in 2000. Not that young. 1986 is when I went. And so it happened to be when Chernobyl had just gone off in Russia, and Libya. There was Libyan, all kinds of stuff. So like all these like international events, and my family was stressed about me going overseas. My grandmother swore I was going to get hijacked, that. And so I got there, and I remember like I didn't know what the momentum to get me there, but I remember having prayed about it, really sincerely saying, if you let me go, I will be a representative in everything that I do. I will make this my mission. And so like my mom had written this was before emails or whatever. So we were all relying on email or letters. And my mom had written to the family, because it's all letters, and said, do you happen to have a church of Jesus Christ that my daughter could attend? And she said, we have one. It's 2 hours away. So it was not an option to go.
Right.
So I was like, okay. So I took my seminary makeup packets, and I was like, all right, I'll work on that on Sundays or whatever. But what's really interesting is it was a very lonely experience. If you've ever lived anywhere where you don't speak the language, you just can't help but be isolated. I knew some German, but not enough to really make friends, whatever.
Right.
So I was very, very lonely. And I remember the first couple days in the first week, just waking up in the middle of the night with jet lag, like being wide awake, totally black, totally alone. And just like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And just being so, so homesick and so sad, and just really, really praying. And that was, I think, one of the few times in my life where I felt like the Holy Ghost, like literally felt someone with their arms around me. And just this really calm feeling after laying there for maybe an hour and a half, just this calmness that put me right to sleep, knowing that I was in the right place at the right time. I was doing what I was supposed to do. I didn't know what it was. But for me, that was one of many experiences where I felt like Christ knew me, knew what I was doing, knew my heart, and was going to help me through it, you know. And it ended up being like tender mercies, like we talked about earlier, where I had experiences where the missionaries found me at my school, at my high school, and I had the opportunity to teach my peers the gospel in a classroom, which was terrifying. But I had like unusual experiences like that. Like they had a world religions class, and the missionaries happened to be there when I was there and asked me to come. And they're 2 missionaries from Utah. And they're like, oh, well, we would love to have you share. And I was like, well, I'm kind of new to all this. And certainly don't know the language well enough. And they're like, well, we just really want you to, you know, be there for questions and whatever. So I had many opportunities actually to teach. So that was kind of
yeah, that's awesome.
Kind of neat. So yeah,
that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, well, is there any other topic that you really need to share with the Lord?
Just that we find the people in Texas to be really friendly, and the Brazos River Ward feels like home. We you know, being 22 years in one particular ward in Florida, our roots there were really deep. And you know, we've gone through hurricanes and all sorts of service projects and deaths and births and things with our ward family in Florida. So that was one of the things I was a little nervous about coming to a new ward. But Brazos River Ward is a great ward, and we really love the people there, and we're grateful to be part of this ward.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, I mean, we've been married 32 years, and we've never lived by family ever in all this time. So the wards that we've lived in have become family, have had to be, you know, and that's the one thing I think that's been the consistency. Being part of the gospel and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ is one of the most important things, I think, for us as a family and individuals. It's kind of that golden chain that's carried us through everything has kind of helped. And yeah, I feel the same way. And one thing, I mean, if I knew you've asked this question, what would you tell your ward? I listened to
Oh, sorry. Let me ask that question. What would you tell if you could tell them anything, what would it be?
I prepared this. No, I'm just kidding. I would say just remember you need each other. That we need each other, that we're not going to make it back ourselves, and that how important each and every person is, and that no one is not important. Like literally, like the children, doesn't matter how old you are, like everybody has experience and something to share with somebody else. And you never know. I mean, I think the Lord uses people, right? He uses us, and I think that's just to say, just to remember that nobody's one. We all need each other.
That's right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, Brother and Sister Johnson, thank you so much for being on the Brazos River Saints podcast. It's really awesome to have you here. And to everyone out there watching, we would like to have you on next. So shoot me a text and I will send you a link to a calendar. Then you can sign up and schedule a time that works for you. Thanks, everybody. Bye.